So the selling process is basically always the same. It's going to be rapport, trust, pain, solution, close. So I know you guys have already been learning a ton of stuff this weekend. So on the subject of building rapport, what are some good things that you guys learned so far from Cole? This makes it so easy because I can pull from all the things you've been learning. What are some good ways to build rapport?
About story questions.
Yeah.
Questions. He said, did somebody say forward? Yeah, that was powerful. What else? What are some other good things? Either over the phone, in person, door knocking. Powerful questions is obviously the best one, but I'm just curious if there's anything else.
Part of it too is like being awareness, because if you're not aware, a lot of times you can miss those key subtleties. That's an opportunity to build rapport off of what the prospect's saying. Awesome.
What about for trust? How do you make the transition from rapport to trust, and how do you actually know that you have trust?
Years of experience.
How do you know if the person trusts you? Because you could have years of experience, but they might think you're like a slime ball.
Get them to agree.
How do you know if somebody trusts you?
If they're agreeing with you.
If they're agreeing with you, but sometimes people just agree and then they never give you their money. They're like, yeah. And then it's like, all right, you ready to sign up? And they're like, no. So how do you actually know if you've transitioned from rapport to trust?
Well, using the word trust over and over again.
That's one of the things you can do. But that doesn't mean they're going to trust you. You can keep saying trust. So how do you actually know when somebody trusts you? It's pretty simple. There's not like,
when they're ready to buy from you?
well, if somebody buys, that's a good indication. Sometimes people will buy, though, just because they're like afraid to like lose rapport. So they may not necessarily trust you.
Trust by by giving them props. Like, hey man, I see your stuff on Short the Gap. You guys are awesome. Your branding is great. Your service looks awesome. I'd love to.
If you were going to sign up, you'd be saying those things.
Right.
Then that would obviously be a good indication. That would be a good indication. But one of the best ways to transition from rapport to trust is as you've been talking with somebody, you can literally just say, so do you trust that what we've been talking about is going to support you? Do you trust that we're the best solar company? Do you trust? You just literally ask. But you have to do it in a good way, not like, do you trust me? Because they might be like, yeah. But you could say, like, based on all the rapport we've been talking about, do you trust that we're one of the top companies that can support you with your branding? Do you trust that we're one of the top solar companies in Orange County? Based on everything that we've shared with you, based on everything that we've talked about, do you trust that? Does it make sense?
Yes.
Because then it becomes very easy. One of the things that you have to understand about sales is one of the most powerful things about human psychology is people have to maintain congruency with the identity that they have for themselves. And so if I was going to sell you on, maybe you guys are in solar? Insurance, okay. Solar. If somebody maybe had a Tesla, but they didn't want to put, I could talk to them about why did you get a Tesla? And if one of the main reasons wasn't because it's cool, because it's fast, or maybe the wife has a Prius, the husband has a Tesla, and the whole reason they bought those cars was because of the energy and all that stuff, then it would be very easy for you to be like, it only makes sense. It's incongruent of their identity to say that they got the car for that reason, but then to not do it for their house. Does that make sense? So like if somebody says, I'm the best athlete, then it would be like, well, the best athlete uses this type of product. So if you're the best athlete, all of these top athletes use it. If you're a top athlete, you should be using this as well. Top coaches also invest in top coaches. So like for you, somebody who's a coach, to be like, you don't invest in coaches, but you're a coach, isn't that hypocritical? So that's what I tell people all the time is I've invested more money as a coach than you'll ever invest. I've paid $25,000 a day for consulting. So I'm like, I've invested more than you'll ever invest. And so if you can just show people like from a place of integrity, it's one of the easiest ways to be able to identify the trust process. So rapport is easy, but trust is when people give you their money. And I'm going to transition to something in a minute it all comes back to trust. If somebody trusts you, that's when they're going to give you their money. And what I teach, ultimately the coolest part about sales is if you can just build a badass personal brand, which is kind of like my bias. I think personal branding is like the cure to success and impact and everything. Because you look at like Oprah, she doesn't need to ever sell, but she'd make more money than all of us if she just simply had an invitation for an offer, right? And so I think selling is great. I think marketing is great. I think you need it, especially in business. And I also think personal branding makes it so you never have to really sell or market again, or at least traditionally. So really the cure to all of this is just build a badass personal brand. and then you never have to sell anything. But I think the foundation of this stuff is really important. I learned all the sales and marketing stuff and got really good at it, but then I realized the real secret was just personal branding. You don't have to sell or market, you can just build a personal brand. So, and personal branding is getting a lot of people to know you, like you, and trust you at such a large scale that Oprah Winfrey doesn't have to try to get people to know her, like her, or trust her. She just has such large numbers of know you, like you, trust you compared to us. Does that make sense? Like she has more people that know her, like her, and trust her than all of us put together, and that's why effortlessly she could just make more money than all of us, and she's a billionaire. So at the end of the day, personal branding is just getting a lot of people to know you, like you, and trust you, and selling is just going up and getting people individually or on stage like Cole does to get them to trust you. But at the end of the day, a personal brand really is the same thing as selling and marketing. It all comes back down to trust. So everything just comes down to trust. People will give you their money if they trust you. And so selling, if you're really good at selling, you can get a complete stranger to trust you in a short period of time and give you their money. And that's really what we're talking about here. So it's pretty simple to transition to find out if somebody trusts you. How did you learn this weekend to elicit pain? Because it's kind of a douchey move to go straight from rapport to agitating somebody's pain. But if you feel like if they trust you, then it's okay. If somebody really knows you, likes you, and trusts you, and cares about you, like your mom or something, right? Then it's okay for them to kind of agitate. Like I have, with this thing, people that I trust have been able to be like, you could die, you have to be really careful. But like if a stranger said that, I'd be like, get the fuck out of here, you're telling me I'm gonna die? So if you have trust, then it's okay to move to the next stage, which is agitating the pain. So what are some ways that you guys have learned to agitate the pain? And a lot of the stuff comes back to asking questions, but I don't want to just hear that. Ask questions. Give me a question that can help elicit pain.
A lot of it's like third-party storytelling,
Right.
where you kind of share the pain, but they also experience the same thing and share that story.
Yeah, it's powerful. Did you have something?
That was it.
That was it?
Yep.
Yeah.
What else? Any powerful questions to elicit pain?
Ask them what are your dreams.
What's that?
Ask them what are your dreams.
What are your dreams? It could be if you didn't did a takeaway. So what would it mean to you if you didn't achieve your dreams, right? So you future pace you either future pace the pain or you future pace the pleasure, and then you can take it away. Because fear of loss is one of the most powerful driving factors of humans. So if you can get them to have the fear of losing their dreams, so you paint this beautiful picture, have them tell you the beautiful picture of what their dream is going to look like, and then say, what would it mean to you if you didn't accomplish that? How would you feel if your child or whatever didn't have that, right? So in insurance, my dad's been in insurance for 38 years, and to me, insurance is like, thank God for insurance. But at the same time, I feel like insurance is one of those things where it's like you scam people into it. It's like the fear of loss. It's like, hey, if your house burns down, how's it going to make you feel to know that your children have to now live on the street or move in with your parents? And as a father, do you really think how's it going to make you feel to know that your wife and your children have to move back in or stay in a hotel? How's it going to make you feel? And really 0.01% of houses ever burn down, but like a good insurance person sells you on the future of the pain. Make sense? But again, it's kind of like a jerk thing to do if you haven't built trust. So if you can build the rapport, if you can build the trust, then you can get into agitating the pain. The real key here though is in the beginning, if you don't build rapport, it's so hard to build trust. And the secret with the rapport is you have to really dig in on like things that you guys can connect with. Something that's really powerful is, we'll talk about it in a little bit, is people like people that are like them or who they want to be like. And so if you can tell stories about how you are like them or how you are like them and who they want to be like, you have some type of a result that they want to achieve as well. Or you can tell stories. So for example, you could share a story about, and out of integrity, you should hopefully have real stories. But I know in sales, it's like I was taught, you just do what you need to do to get the sale, because if your product makes a difference in the person's life, then it's okay. Like the parent should manipulate the child, right? The parent should manipulate the child. The teacher should manipulate the student because they know what's better for them. And so in some scenarios, I've been taught, make up a story if you have to, so that the person can self-identify themselves. So people like people that are like them. And so if you can have, for example, this person is a real story or a made-up story that's just, as you're building rapport with them, you can then take all of that rapport and then create an avatar and just name them Steve or something, right? And be like, you know what? Now that you've told me all of this, it reminds me of a client of ours, Steve, and Steve happens to be just like them. And so then you can take Steve down the journey and explain how, Steve went through this, and Steve was like you, sitting on the fence trying to make the decision of whether or not he wanted XYZ. And he trusted us. He ultimately moved forward with us, and he trusted us because of these reasons. And this is the ultimate pain that he wanted to avoid having. And out of all the different solutions in the marketplace, from this competitor to this competitor, he ultimately chose to go forward with us because, and then down here, then you can ultimately, we'll talk about transitioning to the close, but it's really powerful if you can take people and they can self-identify themselves, because again, people like people that are like them. I don't know what that is.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if you can tell a story where the person can self-identify themselves going through the sales process, and you just kind of are you're selling them through the form. People don't like to be sold, they like to buy. So if I can take you and I can learn all these things about you, and then I can take you and I can put you right here and call you Steve, and then I can verbally walk you through exactly what I'm about to do to you and say, and Steve trusted us because, and you see yourself as Steve. And then Steve was so worried about blah, blah, blah. So instead of me being like, you're worried about, or how would you feel if, you can then say, and Steve was so worried that his 2 daughters, just like your 2 daughters, are going to be doing this and this and this. Does that make sense? So sometimes people don't like to be picked on, and they're like, you're selling me. So when you take the character and you put the character on the story, on the timeline, but you're the character. So I took all the time to build the rapport with you so that I could take you and now make you a character in a story. Does that make sense? And so then I could say, so wouldn't you do the same thing as Steve? And now they're just simply agreeing with a person that's like them. Because we're most influenced by people that are like us or that are like who we want to be like. So if Tony Robbins walked in here and said something, we might be like, yep, because I want to be like Tony Robbins. Or if you and I are alike, because we're friends, then I might do something because you're my friend. But if a stranger came up to me, I might be like, I don't know, like, or trust you. We don't have really rapport. So I might not do what he says. But a friend is going to more likely influence you than a stranger. You're a thought leader, your teacher, your parent, somebody you look up to, who you want to be like, is most likely going to influence you. So people like you and people who you want to be like are most likely going to influence you. And so, again, my solution is just build the personal brand. All of this stuff becomes a lot easier. But for the sake of sales, because personal branding takes time, if you can build the rapport and then through building the rapport, create the character of the story, even if you have to fabricate it a little bit, if you really believe that your product and your service can help the person move down the timeline from the pain they're in to the positive emotions and whatever it is that your product or service helps them with, then I think it's okay to, like a parent makes things up for their child because it's for the betterment of them, right? A teacher might have to say things to move the student. Does this make sense?
Yes.
So it's really powerful. It's a different way of taking what you learn from the rapport process and then creating an avatar and then using that avatar to walk them through the trust, the pain, the solution. Because then what you can do, this is another way to confirm with the trust, is I can say, and one of the reasons why Steve trusted us amongst many things is because of this and this. Are those reasons why you would also trust a company like ours? And then they could say yes. Does that make sense? Another powerful process that we use when it comes to reminding yourself to ask powerful questions. I just literally use like this little one sheet here, and you guys can copy it afterwards if you want to walk up or take a picture of it, is CQVFY. Does anybody want to try to guess what that is? If you guys have been in some of my stuff, you probably know, but CQVFY. Client quantifies value for you. So when you ask questions or when you're taking people through the rapport, trust, pain, solution, close, you want to make sure that you never tell the person the value of your product or your service. Now, in some cases with solar, you might have to say it saves you this much money, right? But then what you could do is you could say, what would that mean to you to save that much money? What would it mean to you? So whatever your value proposition is, the client has to quantify the value for you. And we usually do it in a few different ways. You can do mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, and financial. But the two biggest ones is emotional and financial. So when you're trying to get somebody to quantify the value for you, you're really just trying to get them to emotionally and financially quantify it. So does anybody want to take a stab at some questions that you could say?
Well, I have a question. So are you trying at that point to get them to say an actual number? Or
Yeah, so for example, for coaching, right? So for me, let's just use Patch as an example. If I said, hey, Patch, what would it mean to you? And that's one of the best things. That's the question. What would it mean to you if, and then I could say emotionally or financially, what would it mean to you if you could be the dominant person in the, veteran marketing space? How would that make you feel?
Right.
So what would it mean to you if, and how would that make you feel? The how would that make you feel part is obviously how you quantify it emotionally. And then financially, I could say, what would it mean to you financially if you could not just have one client paying you $50,000 a month, but multiple clients paying you $50,000 a month? What would that mean to you within a 12-month period of time? Then you could put a tangible time period on it. What would that mean to you in the next 6 months? And so those are the two biggest things that we like to quantify, is the emotional and the financial, because that's really the logical and the emotional. Another thing that you can do too is we don't just want to talk about ROI, but we also like to talk about COI. Anybody know what COI means?
Cost of inaction.
Exactly. So a lot of the times when people are selling somebody on something, they're just talking about what's the return on the investment going to be. So if I was saying, what would it mean to you financially if you could blah, 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 that would be talking about ROI most likely. But cost of inaction is sometimes more powerful of a tool to use. And so does anybody want to take a stab maybe at, in your industry, how you use cost of inaction?
By not taking proper action today, by securing the right protection for you and your family, this is what could happen in the future. So just like that story with Steve, the last thing I'm sure you agree, the last thing you would want to have happen to your family is a similar situation as him.
Awesome. Anybody else? How would you use cost of inaction or return on investment? Either one. The return on investment by working with us could be this. But again, remember, that would be, I just caught myself, that would be me telling you. I want to ask questions that get you to tell me the return.
Right.
So that's the key, is you always want to catch yourself. I caught myself instantly doing it. You want the client to tell you the return. You want the client to tell you the cost of inaction. Because it's one thing if you tell me and I sit there and I nod my head. That's what a lot of people will do. Yeah. But if you can get them to tell you, then at the end of the conversation, I can just be like, you told me it would cost you $250,000. How could you not invest $10,000 today?
The one I like to use is I tell them what the average ROI is, and then I ask them, so how much money do you think you're leaving on the table? And then they tell me what their cost of inaction is.
Awesome. That's perfect. Yeah, so you basically contrast it. On average, clients' return will be this, or on average, it's costing companies like this. What do you think it's costing you? Anybody else want to take a stab at this? Are you guys good? Cool. This is literally probably the most powerful part out of everything here is the only reason why somebody's not going to buy from you is because they, at some level, associate more pain to buying than to not buying. So I'll say it again. They associate more pain to buying than to not buying. This is going to change the game for you. So another way of saying this is, instead of people, the only reason why somebody's not going to buy is because they associate more pain to buying than to not buying. Another way of saying it is, they're not 100% certain in the outcome or the result is actually going to take place. So, for example, if it's $10,000 a day to work with me, the only reason why somebody wouldn't move forward is because they're not absolutely certain that they're going to make whatever the thing is we talk about. That the return is going to be this, that the cost of inaction could potentially be this. Like if it's costing them $100,000 a year to not solve the problem, and they could also be making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and then I go and I say, all right, you ready to sign up? And they literally told me, it's probably costing me $100,000, $200,000 a year. It's probably could make me a couple $100,000 or $250,000. And then they're not ready to buy. What? Either I didn't really have a level of trust at what they were saying, but at the core of everything, it's just because they're associating more pain to buying than not buying. You should want somebody to throw their $10,000 at you or whatever it is because they're so certain that they're going to get the outcome and the result because they associate so much pain to not buying that they have to sign up right now and give you their money. Does that make sense? Like if and maybe in insurance, right? That's an example because there's so much pain to the thought of not buying. It's like you're such a scumbag if you're not going to pay $200 a month or whatever for your insurance. When this terrible pain could happen, it's like, okay, I'll pay $200.
Starbucks every day.
Yeah, exactly, right? You're buying this and this and this, but this terrible pain could happen like it did to Steve, and you're going to not invest $200 a month. It's like, okay, so there's so much. That's why insurance is usually billion-dollar companies, because it's like, okay, there's so much easy pain to just agitate that like they're going to buy every time. And then the return and the cost is so small. It's like insurance is always so cheap that it's like pennies on the dollar and you get $1 million, you know. So at the end of the day, the only reason why somebody doesn't buy is because they associate more pain to buying than not buying. Another way of saying it is they're not 100% certain in the outcome that you guys have talked about. And so one of the things that I'll do is I'll literally just ask somebody if we get ready to move forward, and for some reason as we transition to the close, which if you remember, one of my favorite ways to transition to the close is to just simply say, so based on what you've told me, that's literally it. At any point in the conversation, I can just say, once you're done talking or whatever, answering my question, I can say, fantastic. So based on everything that you've told me, there's maybe only out of the 5 ways we serve people, really only 2 that I think are going to be a good fit. Would it be okay if I shared those with you? At any point in the conversation, you can say that. So based on everything that you've shared with me, all the different ways we serve people, the 5 ways we serve people, there's really only 2 that I think are going to be the most suitable.
Question for you. So during this process, I'd be curious how you frame it in the circumstance where a competitor can deliver maybe the same solution. They didn't deliver the same service, but they can deliver the same end result solution at a lower price point.
Are they already using them?
No, they're shopping.
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes they are.
Yeah.
So when somebody is using somebody else, I'm glad you brought it up, one of the things that I'll recommend is you simply say, so you're already using so-and-so, and they're great. They're not as good as us, so you do that. They're great. They're not as good as us, and we can talk about those differences. So tell me, what are 3 things that they're doing really well for you?
You mean the carrier?
The competitor. You're using a competitor of mine. So for Marshall, right? I'm already using a coach. Oh, that's awesome. Who is it? And then they tell you, and if you don't know, I don't know who they are. Oh, I do know who they are. They're great. They're not as good. They are good. But what are 3 things they're doing really well for you right now? They tell you those 3 things, and then you say, wonderful, and what are 3 things that they could do better? So you start with the 3 things they're doing well, and you say, because otherwise you come off as jabbing them. Oh, no, they suck. What are things they could do better? So, oh, no, they're great. They're not as good. Playful, right? But what are 3 things that they're doing well? They tell you the 3 things they're doing well, and then you say, well, what are 3 things that they could do better? And then they tell you, And then as soon as they tell you, then you go right back up to quantifying. Well, and what do you think that's costing you in the long run? And how does it make you feel to know that you're not getting those full benefits or that you're not getting taken care of at the highest level? And what is that costing you financially? And how much do you think that's going to cost you in a 12-month period of time? And so now I call it the eggshell. You can't crack the eggshell. If they have an objection, you can't come up and crack the egg. People don't like that. If they are already working with somebody else, you can't come up and smash that and be like, they suck, they're terrible. They have to do it. And so if you just say, what are 3 things they're doing well? What are 3 things they could do better? And so if they don't know the 3 things that they could be doing better by going with somebody cheaper,
Absolutely.
and you obviously would know your industry, if there's somebody who's cheaper,
Yeah. So
you know
one of
what
the
I mean?
things we do to like counteract that is we get to the end of the sales process, and if that's an objection, where I can see the value in building this up front before the objection, because once we get to the objection and they say that it's price, well, you know, one thing that's great, they're a great company, but one thing you don't get with them is me. And based off of what you told me, you were actually substantially underinsured. You have $100,000 in coverage with them. We discovered based off what you told me, you needed an extra $900,000. So had you have been with them and the unexpected happened to you, it could have resulted in financial devastation, and that's why you need us.
But again, find a way for me to tell you that,
Right. Okay.
right? Because otherwise now didn't it feel like he was selling me?
Yep.
Which was great, because you're a great salesman, but no one wants to work with a salesman,
Sure.
right? And not just from that quick assessment,
No,
obviously. So find a way, and this is the game, right? Find a way for me to say those things to you. So what would it mean to you to know that you have somebody who's going to stick their neck out for you, who's always going to be there, who's going to make sure that you're not just getting the best price, which is usually the lowest quality, but you're also going to get, what would that mean to you? Would you want that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So do you see the power in shifting that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because if you said it that way, then I'd be like,
like you told me.
I want a guy that's going to be there, who's going to stick his neck out,
And now if he says no, it's
who's
like,
going to
well,
not just shop around for the
then if he
cheapest
says
price.
No, then it's like, well, were you
What's-
not genuine and sincere when you told me
When you told me,
that you saw the value in us?
see the power in the little shift?
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's me being sold versus me selling myself.
Absolutely. I love it.
And again, people have to maintain congruency with their identity. And so if you can get me to agree so much with the identity of this person who already walked through the process and signed up, then at some point I can't deviate off the path. I've agreed so many times. I've told you that I am this guy who's already bought.
Absolutely.
Make sense?
Love it. Yeah. It's great.
Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say one thing. Typically what I found works really well is another follow-up question to that. When they say the 3 things, I can tell that's important to you. Why? And then you're getting more from the rapport. You're
Yeah.
able to build the story. And then the agreement, I'm so glad you brought that up. And I share
Yeah.
with you why this is where we really specialize.
Love
And
it.
then we hit those 1 or 2 pain points. They go, oh, so
Yeah.
you're able to do this for me and they're not. We've gotten a lot of clients from
Yeah.
competition that way.
Good. Very powerful. Thank you for sharing. So I just have little notes written on here. I'm just referencing. So a good little thing to remember is when you get an objection, it's not like a jab at you. It's not. It's really nothing. An objection is what I wrote here. Is an objection is nothing more than a level of uncertainty. And so when somebody has an objection, don't take it personal. Don't feel like you've got to lean in and give them all the benefits to your product or service. Or maybe I didn't tell you enough about the benefits of our company, right? It's like, no. What you really need to just do is go back to at what level are they associating more pain to moving forward? If somebody doesn't want to buy, it's just because they're still somewhere associating some level of pain to buying and moving forward. And the easiest thing to do is to literally just say, I've told people over the phone, and it's gotten me a lot of sales before, I'll say, you know what's really interesting about psychology and people? And I do this all the time, as I'll say, when people don't move forward with our company, it's really just because at some level they associate more pain to getting the insurance, the premium service of insurance, the premium coach, the premium whatever, solar, right? They associate more pain to whatever your product or service is than they do to not having it. So where is that level of uncertainty? Can you share with me why you're still not 100% certain or committed to the benefits that come with having this?
Yeah, just asking them outright.
You just hand them the shovel and just say, dig your hole. Just start digging. And when they hear that, they're like, shit. You'll see people just almost, I've had people literally be like, you know what, you're right, I'm going to sign up. Just because they don't know what to say. Think about what would you say back to that. If I'm like, hey, we should do a VIP day. And we went through this whole process and it's time to sign up. And I was like, and you're like, you know, dude, I'm just, a few more months, give me a few more months. How could you say that after everything we just talked about? At some level, you must be still associating some level of pain or uncertainty to moving forward to really get these benefits. Because you just told me the return could be this, and the cost of not doing it could be this. So, I mean, whichever one of those you want to use to motivate you, I just don't understand how you're still uncertain that we're going to get this. And that staying in this place is worth a measly $10,000 investment when you already said it's going to cost you $100,000 in the next 6 months as we wait. So where is there some level of pain or uncertainty that moving forward is still something that you're not 100% committed to yet?
You know what, you're right. Sign up.
And that's kind of, I don't like using pressure tactics, but I don't even consider that a pressure tactic. That's just me kind of taking everything back and putting it on you. You said all of this, and I just set it on your lap. And then you kind of look at your dirty laundry and you're like, fuck, I did say all that. And so if you can just remember that the close happens in the beginning. Remember that. Like in real estate, you don't make money when you sell, you make money when you buy. The close happens in the beginning. So if you understand that, when I'm going to close, I'm simply going to reference everything we talked about in the beginning. Does that make sense? That's huge. The close happens in the beginning. A lot of the times, people are just dragging their feet through this process. They're dragging their feet through this process because they don't understand how important it is to making the close. The close should happen effortlessly. The close should simply be based on everything you've told me. And out of the 5 ways we work with people, there's really only 2 that are the best solution that I've seen, because I always say a prescription before diagnostic is malpractice. If I were to just prescribe you something now, that wouldn't be professional of me. And a lot of the other people in the industry that have the lower prices, they just want to get the deal done. They know they have a cheaper price. They're just trying to get it done. I take the time to have you fill out a 300-question questionnaire to really, or take the time in addition to the questionnaire to have a phone call with you, because I understand how important it is for us to understand your unique situation. So if you can just understand how powerful this process is, that when the close happens, it's nothing more than, would you like this option or this option? And the best thing is the curiosity of, we have 5 ways, 6 ways that we work with people, but there's really only 2 that I think are the best fit for you. Curiosity drives action. Mystery drives action. So inevitably, I'm telling you, I've never had somebody not say, tell me what they are. Out of the 5 ways we work with people and support them with blah, 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 there's really only 2, based on everything you shared with me, that I know are going to be a good fit. Would it be okay if I share those with you? Every time they say yes, which is now what we call a permission-based close. Permission-based close. And so, I'm just checking my time. And then at that point, they say, yes, share those 2 things with me. I say, great. Before I share those with you, I want to remind you that this is something that I do as well. It's called future pacing, up the ladder of success, where I'll say, so let's just say, I saw I have more time, so now I'm dragging stuff out. And again, I'm making these numbers up. There's 5 ways that we work with people. there might really be 5. I'm just for the sake of the example, right? You guys don't have to be like, but I don't have 5 ways. And a lot of the times you can just make new services up so that you do have 5 ways. You don't have to ever provide them. So what we'll do is we'll say, there's 5 ways that we work with people, but based on everything that you've shared with me, I really only think that there's 2 that are going to be a suitable fit to help you get this result. So I'm subliminally planting in their head that there's really only 2 ways that I'm confident we're going to be able to get you these results. Would you like to hear what it is? So as soon as they say yes, they're also, neuro-linguistic programming, they're also agreeing that these 2 things are going to get them the positive result that we talked about. Do you see the subtlety of the power of that? Out of the 5 ways we work with people, there's really only 2 that I'm confident and certain will help you get this result and outcome that we just spent all this time talking about. Would you like to hear what they are? As soon as they say yes, some part of them has just agreed that those 2 services are going to get them that result. Do you understand that? That's NLP. That's just weaving belief systems into their brain and future pacing them. Then what I'll do is I'll say, and this is really powerful, and this doesn't work for all businesses, so feel free to challenge me if this works for your business or not. I prefer it so that you're not just sitting here like wondering if it will. So now what I would do is I'd say, okay, you said yes, you'd like to hear what the 2 are. I'll say, great. Now before I share with you what those 2 are, I want to remind you that our highest level service is $500,000. And so they've said they want to hear the 2, but before I tell them, I say, I want to first tell you what our highest level service is. And it's $500,000. And our goal of working with you at either of the 2 options that I'm going to talk about in a second, our goal is to work you up the ladder so that you can become one of our $500,000 clients. But here's the thing. We don't let anybody start there until they've first done one of our other services that I'm going to talk to you about in a second. The reason why is because we want to lay the foundation of success first so that you can start to get the results that we want to see first in your business before we take you up to the highest level service, because we never want to overcommit anybody at our highest level. So we always like to start them at something that makes more sense and gets them results now. Does that make sense?
You didn't say that to me, you just took my money.
So I'd say, does that make sense? And as soon as they say yes, then now they've agreed that this is going to help them get results, and that as we move up the ladder, they're going to future pace themselves becoming a top client up here. But it all first starts by getting success down here. And so that whole conversation is them agreeing, I'm going to invest down here, and I'm going to work my way up to becoming one of your top clients. Do you see the power in that?
Yeah.
It's all future pacing. They're agreeing they're going to have success at this level. They're agreeing that hearing these options that are going to get them the results is what they want. They're future pacing themselves up the ladder. They're agreeing that they don't want to be overextended, that starting here makes sense. Do you see the power in this? So the transition to the close is, based on everything you've shared with me, there's 5 ways we work with people, but there's really only 2 that I'm confident and certain will get you the results of X, Y, Z that we've talked about. Would it be okay if I shared those with you? They say yes, you say great. Before I share those with you, I want to remind you or share with you that our highest level service is $100,000, $200,000, $300,000. But we never let anybody start at that level first, because we never want to overextend them. We first want them to start at one of these levels so they can get the foundation of success, they can get awesome results, and that we can prove that everything we've just talked about is going to work for you. And then as you get success, we work you up to becoming our highest level client. Does that make sense?
Right.
They say yes. This whole time they've just been agreeing to joining this service and working their way up and becoming one of your top clients. And I'll say, and then you guys have the opportunity to work your way up and be like our client Patch. Woo! So then I'll give them examples of clients at the top that are crushing it. And so it's like, these clients are making this much money, but it's all because they started here. Does that make sense? So Peter, you had your hand up?
Yeah, it was really the dialogue at that point that you shared that I was looking for, so thank you, yeah.
Cool. You like that? It's going to be good for you. Especially in the coaching space, it's going to be powerful. Super powerful for you, bro. It's going to be nuts for you in the coaching space and for Peter because he's in the coaching space as well. But this works for any business. You could ask me about your business if it will work for yours. Yeah?
As far as raising money for real estate,
Okay.
how could I implement something like that?
I mean, that's just going to come down to massive amounts of level of trust with your investor. So you're either going to have a damn good plan that shows them financial projections of how you're going to make their money back. And ideally, first, an investor only cares about making their money back. That's the first thing, is when you try to raise money, you need to show them two plans. Here's how I guarantee get your money back. Here's how, best case scenario, we freaking crush it and you make a ton of money. And we all make a ton of money. That's the mistake a lot of people make is they go in with only a game plan on how you're going to succeed as an investor, but all an investor first cares about is how I get my money back. Because most, like Mark Cuban, he has 500, 600, 700 companies. He knows 80, 90% of those are going to fail. So all he cares about is the one or two that are going to become such big home runs. They balance the rest out. So most of his companies, if he can just break even on, that's a good investment for him. Does that make sense? So if you're going to raise money, you got to have two options. Here's how I guarantee get your money back, and then here's how we actually succeed. And if you can have both of those, then you'll be in a much better spot than just trying to show them how they're going to make money. Because that's obviously the pipe dream, right? Somebody who goes in and says, here's worst case scenario where you still get your money back. Here's best case scenario where all of our wildest dreams actually happen. Does that make sense? Most people just go in with the pipe dream. And an investor knows, I'm hedging my bet. I don't know if this is actually going to work or not. So show me how I can, worst case scenario, get my money back. Does that make sense? Or build a ton of trust with somebody like Cole's had a few people, select people do with him, and he'll do deals with. Does that make sense? But Cole's probably a better person to ask that question to. And he's sitting right next to you. Any other questions? Yeah.
So I shoot weddings, and so I can't, there's nothing after the wedding that I necessarily upsell it to.
Wrong. Joint ventures, affiliates, host beneficiaries, what do people, after weddings, what do people buy?
Baby pictures and stuff like that.
Associated with their wedding, like an album or...
What else? Keep going. Spit out ideas, guys. Who's been married in here and what did you buy after your wedding?
Get divorce pictures, dude. I'm taking it.
So you capture the emotion with something that's representative of that day. So it could be some kind of product that does that.
Follow up with them in 9 months and see if they're ready to have baby pictures.
Right, but it'll be a much smaller sale, like for people don't spend nearly as much as they do with the wedding, so that's where I was thinking.
What's your long-term vision though? Are you trying to become the guy for wedding photography? Like the most expensive, highest end, only do rich people? What's your goal? Because that's a tough business to be in. It's very competitive, it's very seasonal, you don't have a very long lifetime value of a customer. So that's just one of those businesses where I'd be like, I want to get into a business where the marginal net value of my customer is so big that the first transaction is almost irrelevant compared to the lifetime value. All businesses where the lifetime value, the marginal net worth of the customer is so much more than the initial transaction, those are businesses you want to be in because it's easier to get a current customer to buy again than to get a new customer to buy. And so any business where every customer that's bought continues to buy more stuff, those are the best businesses to be in. So you need to figure out how do I get my first customer to either send me a bunch of referrals, but also increase the marginal net value of their lifetime.
Okay. You can combine the two when we get with you afterwards.
Yeah, I have a quick say, you could partner up with a venue. You could try to sell a venue, hey, this is my services. They could recommend you, you could have every single weekend you'd be at that venue. Where I have a few venues where they'd have you there every weekend, yeah, this is our guy. It's
Yeah.
Also to the coaching space that we were talking about yesterday, because he's gonna crush it. He's the world-leading photography videographer.
Yeah.
So you could teach other photographers how to get into the space.
This makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's gonna
Cool.
kill
Cool.
it. He's
Nice.
Yeah, I can see that too. It's like you kill it in your space and then do like a Lightspeed VT type thing, teaching other photographers how to do that on a subscription basis.
That's the next thing, yeah. It's exciting.
Nice. Who else? Any questions? I think that was everything on my notes.
Nice job, man.
Yeah, I think it was.
Thank you
All right.
so much.
As Cole says, 2 times. Thanks, guys.